I want to say first, before the presentation of my paper, it's a great honor for me to be invited here to give a speech by the president of ISA. As all you know, for some reasons, Chinese Sociological Association now is not a national member of ISA, but I think my presence is a very symbolic event because it means Chinese sociological community will return to the international community of sociological world. So thank you for the Michel Vilga. I think he really do an exception in the history of ISA. So the title of my paper is Sustainable Development of Seen from China, because Vilga asked me to talk about these topics. But I think the sustainable development have the different meanings. So after the crisis, China has now put forward a new concept of changing the mode of development. The dam is closer, the meaning of sustainable development, but it covers even more contents. The first, we think the development should no longer rely excessively on investment and exportation, because you know the exportation of China now have the dispute with the different countries, especially the United States. But we want also, I think in this dimension, we have the consensus with America. We think we should also rely our development more and more on the domestic consumption. The second, the development should be changed from a low-cost quantitative expansion to the qualitative technology of improvement. The third, I think that development should be changed into a resource-saving and environment-friendly mode. This is, I think, perhaps the most important meaning of sustainable development. But today I should limit my topics on the first dimension, that is to say the development of China should rely on more and more the domestic consumption. So the first part I will talk about the new strategy of development of China. The first, you know, after the crisis, perhaps it's too early to talk about the after the crisis, because someone think, not someone, perhaps there is many people think the crisis will come again. So for the China, I think after the crisis, we put forward a new concept of change the development mode. So we will establish a new strategy of development. The first, we change from relying excessively on the investment and exportation to more and more on the domestic consumption. The second, we must start the reform of income distribution. The third is the balancing the economic growth and the social development. But in China, we found normally for the economic growth we see there are three forces that drive the economic growth. That is the investment, exportation, and the domestic consumption. But for a long time, the consumption, especially domestic consumption, not play an important role for the economic growth of China. From 19 1985 to the 2008, Chinese residents' consumption rate, namely the proportion of consumer spending to the GDP, has declined from 52 to the 35%. The rate was far lower than America, 70%, and Japan's 65%. So, the 300 million American people consume more than US dollars 10 trillion worth of commodities every year, but for the China, with a big population, consume only over US dollar 1 trillion every year. That's why the Chinese have a very lower rate of consumption. But normally, if a country with a consumption rate very lower, this is the people who lacks the money. But in China, it's very strange we could find. No, the Chinese government don't like so much money. From 1994 to the 2008, China's tax revenue increased very quickly. About average annual growth of 18% was far higher than the GDP growth. So perhaps the problem is the people who is poor. But it's not true also now. We could see the Chinese people seem to like no money also. From 1994 to the 2009, the total savings of residents increased also every year 18% also, which was also far higher than the GDP growth. So, what is the real reason? So I think the fundamental reason for the Chinese sluggish consumption lies in the structure of Chinese society, and especially the income distribution. Because over the recent more than 30 years, China's greatest achievement has been its rapid economic growth, whereas its most challenging problem lies with the income distribution. So the second part, I will talk about the social challenge to China today. So you could see this is very quickly augment of inequality of income distribution in China by Gini coefficient. So in the beginning of reform, the China have a very equal distribution of income. So the Gini coefficient is only 0.2 about that. But in a very short period of 30 years, the Gini coefficient now in 2008 reached to 0.5. So it's very quickly enlargement of inequality of income. So the main reason to explain this quick enlargement of income gaps is the gaps between the rural area and the urban sector. So you could see the blue line is the urban people income growth is very similar with the growth of GDP per capita. But for the rural area, that is the red line, the income of peasants augment very slowly. So in China, we don't talk about the farmer, but it's the peasant, it's small farmers. So the economic structure very different from the social structure. So you could see in the left the GDP structure. Now for the agriculture value occupy only 10%, but for the labor forces in the employment, the agricultural labor occupy still 38%. But for the, in the China, in the cities, we have a policy of only children. So the people in the countryside, they have more children. So for the rural area, the people occupy 52% for the total population. So you could see the 52% of population and the 38% of labor forces could share only the 10% of GDP. So that is why there is great gaps between the rural and the urban area. Along with the increase of the income distribution, we found the decreasing consumption rate of family with the growth of income. You could see, according to the survey, social survey in 2008. So the highest in the right is the highest family. In the highest family, the consumption rate of family the only more than 50%. But for the lowest income family, the consumption rate of family could reach to more than 9%. So if you want to augment a consumption, total consumption of a country, you must transfer the income, the part of augmentation of total income to the middle income family and the lowest income family, because this family need the consumption. The second problem for the China for the problem of the consumption is the social security, the public services, and especially now the problem is the consumption of a house. So there is the three factors. The most important, he influence the result of consumption of the family is the education. You could see the education, the lowest income family, the education spending occupy a very high percentage compared with the highest income family. It's a very similar phenomenon we could find also for the medical care, and only the house. There is the richer people. He have many houses in China, but not for the reason of consumption, but it's like an investment, because in China you know the price of houses augment very quickly. So I think the consumption problem also includes the relation with the structure of social stratification. So in China you could see with the gaps between the rural and the urban areas, the social stratification structure is very different between the rural area and the cities. So you could see in the urban, the middle class have now become bigger and bigger. But in the rural area, there is so many peasants. He have like a pyramid of structure. So to augment the total consumption of whole countries, we must need bigger middle class. But in China, the middle class is the Confucius concept in the sociology. But we have many standards to define the middle class. But for us, we have choice, the income, occupation, and education. We think it's the three most important facts he decided middle class in the structure of stratification. We chose the three factors to define the middle class. So we could find in China, in the whole now, for the whole countries, the middle class occupy 12%. But for only the city society, for now there is about 25% of middle class. But in China, we have a so large population, so every point of percentage augment of the middle class. That means a greater number of population is a bigger consumer market. The income distribution programs in China not only have a close relation with the consumption, with the social stratification, but also he become the reasons for many social problems. So this is the self-identity of socio-economic status. We could see in different countries, the Gini coefficient is very different also. For example, Brazil, the Gini coefficient is very high. The Japan, I think, is the lowest Gini coefficient in all the developed countries in the world. But for the self-identity, normally there is 60% of people who think himself is the middle. It's the similar for the India, for example, there is the 57% of people who think they are middle. But in China, you could see the very strange. There is only the people who think himself is the middle is only 36, but there is 55, more than 55% of people who think himself is lower in the middle lower. So so in China, you could the people, not the people in the lowest income, who is angry to the system of income distribution. But for the middles, the people like me, I don't satisfy also to the income distribution. So that problem he have the income distribution become a reason for many social problems. So why the China could not to continue to development to keep his steps like what happened in the last 30 years? Because the China there is a great change of pyramid of population also. So we could see in the 2025, the whole population, the structure will change very heavily. We have the labor forces, the percentage of labor forces will decrease the percentage very quickly. So about 2017, that is the point of 10 for the population. So in China, we talk about now, perhaps the supply of labor forces will change the mode. because so the salary, the income of the migrant workers will now augment very quickly also. We have more percentage of elder people. So for every family, now you could see in China with the policy of only children. So we have 2 only children, so he have the 4 parents and he have 16 grandparents. So how to keep the traditional family support the older peoples? It's not possible. So we should enlarge the social security for every people. So we could see the participation rate of labor force decrease also now, because in China before we have a liberation of women. So every woman he think if you want to occupy a position in the society, you must participate the workers. But now the people with the reform, the people, he changed his conception. He don't want to, especially for the younger people, he think it's not really necessary to participate to the worker. He could have a richer family to keep his the life model. So the elder increase in the labor force decline in the future is the point is about in the 7 years later. So the China now he prepare this great change of population. So we must change the model of development. Also, we should establish more balanced, more harmonious society. We could see the change of population dependency rate. Dependency rate including the elder and the children. So also it's in the memo point in the history about 2007, 2008, 2018. So there is the change of the population dependency ratio. So finally, what is the choice? So the China, I think the most important for the choice of a social policy is to keep balanced development. But that balanced development in multi-dimension, not only in the dimension of social and economic development, but also in the rural and urban area development, but also balanced, I think, the China development with the world. The second, establish institutional triangle among the socialist harmonious society, market economy, and democratic politics. We call the SHMD model. Because many people think now China is not a country of democratic, but China has tried to develop his own democratic, perhaps not because based on direct election, but based on deliberate cooperation. The third is we should strengthen the social reform, because during the 30 years, China is the reform is focused on the economic institutions. But now we should really start on social reform of, for example, income distribution, employment, education, medical care, social security, etc. So after, I think perhaps after 20 years, we do a solid social reform. We establish social institutions in different domains. After that, perhaps China could really start on a political reform. So it's my point of presentation. Thank you.